And actually, it's one continuous point. So a very brief introduction, some of it we covered. This chapter, chapter 10, the Rebbe covers a righteous man. I have questioned last week at the class, what defines a tzaddik, a righteous? Some would say, study Torah all day. Some would say, God listens to him. Some would say, a very kind-hearted, very generous. Some would say, he knows the whole Torah. There are different ways to define a tzaddik. The Torah teaches us that a tzaddik is someone who is serving God with both sides of his heart. We have discovered in chapter 8 that the heart is actually divided into two. The left side is the source or the representation of the evil soul or the animal soul, and the right side of the heart is the representation of the godly soul. It's actually stemmed from the brains, from the mind, but it comes down to the right side of the heart. Serving God with all our heart appears in the Shema, last week's Torah portion, and we say it 3 times a day, with both your hearts, it says, not with one heart, referring to both sides of the heart, which actually in Kabbalistic terminology, it refers to with both souls. And a tzaddik is someone who does what God wants. The rabbi is going to divide a tzaddik into 2 general categories. One, a complete tzaddik who will do only good, only for God's purpose. And the other is an incomplete tzaddik, a tzaddik that is incomplete, missing. That's why, enjoy. That's why there are 2 types of tzaddikim. The difference is not with their garments, which is thought, speech, and action, but rather it is in the existence of the animal soul. A righteous man is impossible to sin. A righteous man, impossible to even use his mind, his thinking process for an evil thought, to hurt somebody, to stay away from God in his mind, or his mouth, or in action. A righteous man is defined as someone who will always do, speak, and think godly. However, there are 2 general categories. One, which is a complete tzaddik, and we'll discover when we get to that one, we'll see a little bit deeper understanding of that concept. And the other is an incomplete tzaddik, referring to the fact that the evil soul still exists, but the evil soul is dehydrated, is impossible to function, but it's there. How do we know it's there? Says the Rebbe, I hate those that hate the people I love. If I truly love my family and someone is an enemy of my family, I hate those people. If I hate someone and they love somebody else, I hate those people too. The way it works, in the way God created us, unlike food, garments, you can have different types of food. I can enjoy sushi and meat and chicken and dairy, respectively, of course. I can enjoy different types of food. I can also love a bunch of people, family, friends. It's not one. However, the rules of life are that if I hate an individual, I hate those who love that individual. If I love an individual deeply, truly from my heart, anyone who is the enemy of those people is my enemy as well. Simple as that. You may disagree. It's hard for me. I was looking to find a parable that can explain that deeper, and I couldn't find. So I'm going to say it in a simple way. If someone hates my children, I am his enemy. I hate that person. If someone loves my children, I love him too. The same as a spouse, the same as parents, the same as friends, the same are co-workers. Anyone whom I love those people who love that person. Anyone I hate the people who love that person. Says the Rebbe, it's impossible for someone to have true, deep, complete love to God and enjoy and derive pleasure from something which is defiled or despicable by God. Because if I love God truly, the way it's described in Tanya, which is a very lofty type of love, complete love, in love with God, and God says, don't speak evil language, don't lie, don't cheat. If I cannot despise this type of language, it is an indication that my love to God is not complete. So there were many, many righteous people that, for example, when they were told that the food that they consumed was not kosher, they puked. They let it out. Why? Naturally, they could not stand that food God said not to eat is still in their body, because that's the way they were brought up, and that's so intrinsic in their life that they can't stand to do something which is not godly. Therefore, an incomplete tzaddik will not despise that which is sin. He will refrain from engaging, but he is not running away from it. He does not hate. He doesn't hate it, and that's an indication that his love for God is not a complete love. Had he had amassed a complete love for God, he would have completely despised and distanced himself completely from anything which is not something God loves, because that which is loved by my lover is the one I love. I hope I made myself clear. A complete tzaddik, however, is someone who has no evil. The animal soul is not there, and therefore he will not only will not have a desire, but if someone will try to make him commit a sin, he will run away from it, and it would be like something that we hate. And I have a story for that. The following story I heard many years in the name of my great-grandfather, was a famous rabbi. He was known as giving good stories, and this is one of his stories. The way I share it is a little bit of a change of the version. There was a man once who sat down among Hasidim, and he told the Hasidim, "What are you making a big deal about your Rebbe? Your Rebbe, all he does is get a great honor and a lot of money. That's what it's all about. Show. It's all about he's very rich because the Hasidim support the Rebbe, and he gets a lot of honor. Anywhere he goes first. Everybody stands up. Everybody respects. So why are you making a big thing out of him?" And one Hasid turned to him and said, "Let me explain you understanding of a Rebbe. There was in Europe, in Russia, in those days, there was no water in the house. So they used to go to the well to draw water. So they had what we call multi-purpose for the water. They wouldn't just wash dishes, for example, then throw away the water. Also, there was no dish detergent. Whatever, Procter and Gamble did not make it to Russia. So the farmer's wife, every Shabbat, that's the only time a week, they ate meat in the cholent. They had good, fatty, good meat. Saturday night, she would wash the dishes. But what did she do with the dishes that after she washed them? She would place them before the cow, for the cow to enjoy the tasty water that had all the leftover and the bones. Because there was no dish detergents. Don't get scared. The animals did not get poisoned. One time, the wife of the farmer's wife, after washing dishes, by mistake, she poured the water away. Come Sunday morning, once a week, the cow is supposed to get a very tasty water. She poured a very plain water that she drew from the well. The cow got very upset. How come I'm mistreated? How come this Sunday I'm not getting enough? So she's thinking and thinking and thinking, and finally she came to a realization that most likely the farmer's wife is jealous of her tasty, choice water, and she drank it herself. That's why she gave her different water. And the chassid turned to that man and says, can you imagine that you next to the Rebbe is just like the cow thinking about the water for the from the farmer's wife? Because for you, the gold and silver and honor is like the water that they wash dishes in, that place before the cow. For the cow, it's all her life. The whole week she's looking forward for it. But imagine for the farmer's wife, for herself, this water was so despicable that she never even entertained the idea of allowing a human being to drink from. However, from that's the way the cow sees it, because the cow is all into those water, and that's the best that she can get. So that's the difference between the way I understand. Is that's what a chassid, a tzaddik who is complete tzaddik, for him, sin is so far removed that if you ask him to sin, he can puke. Just like offering the water that you wash dishes in, that for the cow, we enjoy it and we look forward to it, but for the host himself, or for the farmer's wife, she wouldn't even dare come close to it. But from the cow's perspective, I have another story to share with you, but that has to do with, I will be repeating it tomorrow night, and I don't care because it's a very powerful story. So those of us who come tomorrow night, you'll hear it a second time, and I guarantee you will gain much deeper insight to it. Anybody heard of the Graf Potocki? Anybody? Nobody heard of him. Okay. So it's very sad. There is a man called, that is known in Jewish history as Avraham ben Avraham, Abraham, son of Abraham. Google, you'll find the book. There is a book in Hebrew, and I'm sure in English. Actually, it's in our library, Abraham, son of Abraham. He was born to a royal family in Poland in the 18th century. He found Judaism by mistake. He converted, but the church was running the show in Poland. They searched for him. They couldn't find him. But then after many years, 20 years later, he decided to return back to Poland, to the same village. And by mistake, somebody revealed his true identity. And his nurse, the girl that raised him, she knew he had a birthmark. She was able to identify him. And the church was so ashamed that this man was the top, he was supposed to be the leader, converted, that they tried to intimidate him and force him. And his mother came to try. And then the church ruled that he was going to die in a very cruel way, burning at the stake, but after great pain. And all along, they tried to convince him to go back to Christianity, and he refused. He was burned on the stakes on Shavuot, on the holiday of Shavuot, 1724. If you want to know, so this is 2023, so it's about 300 years ago, 299 years ago. The book is very famous. He ran away to Paris. He came from a royal family. He ran away to Paris. That's where he found Judaism. And in Paris, he knew that the church from Poland can trace him. So he hid in Amsterdam. He came to a town. It's a very famous story. It's a fascinating story. In Amsterdam, the rabbi of the community in Amsterdam received a letter, because in those days in Europe, if you convert someone to Judaism, it puts the entire Jewish community in danger, because the church would not allow it, and they will literally kill everyone involved. But he was able to live in Amsterdam until he returned back to Poland, to the village where he came from, because he wanted to come back. But at the time, he was a totally different person. And tomorrow night, I'm going to show how was he revealed. When he was put on the stakes on the holiday of Shavuot, the one who was about to execute him turned to him and he said to him, I envy you because I don't have such a faith. And I know that when you go up to heaven, you are going to pray and ask God to punish us. So he was about to ask forgiveness. This man was about to ask forgiveness. But this man, Avraham ben Avraham, you never heard of that story? Yeah. Avraham ben Avraham turned to the executioner and says, let me tell you a story. That's a story in a story. He told them that when he was a child, he had clay soldiers, toys. He came from a very rich, very wealthy family. So he had very expensive toys. They were made of clay, little soldiers. A soldier with a gun, a soldier with an arrow, a soldier on a horse, a series of soldiers. One of his friends was very jealous, as children, and he went and knocked them all out. He broke them, and he was very mad. So he turned to his father, and he went to his father crying, and he says, Dad, you are the Graf. Graf is the ruler, is the sheriff of the entire country. He was supposed to become the Graf. He says to him, you are the ruler, you have the power. Why don't you punish this child? So his father says to him, don't worry. It's not worth it to hurt him, because if I punish him, it will be much more severe than what he deserved. But when you grow up, I'm sure you'll be able to buy yourself new toys. So he said to the executioner, I said to myself, my father don't want to punish him, I'll punish him. When I grow up, one day I'll be a very powerful man, and then I'll take revenge. When I grew up, I wanted to punish him, but my father warned me. One day I shared with my father before his father was still alive, and my father warned me not to hurt him because it's not worth it. But I figured I have to punish him for the jealousy he had for me when I was a child. But later on, as I mature in life, I realize that what he did for me is so minute. Breaking those toys, those clay soldiers, have so little value. It's not worth to hold the back for so long and to punish him now, no matter how little the punishment is, 20 years, 30 years later, is going to be way, way more severe than what he has done. And as the time went by, I was embarrassed by the thought, how was it possible for me to even think to punish him? I understand when I was a child, children, the clay toys were everything. But now that I'm mature, how come I asked my father to punish him? It was no value. Those toys have there was so little value. He says to him, I am sure you can imagine that I never punished this man, and I never want to punish this man. And the same is with you. He says to the executioner, you think that what you're doing is taking away a life, and therefore I should hold it back, hold it against you and punish you. But when I stand before God, the creator of the universe, and my soul is connecting to God, I would not dare waste any time or energy to talk to someone who is hurting my body, because my body is so little value compared to my soul. Don't even think that I would even consider what you've done for me, you've done to me as harsh or cruel, because just like the clay soldiers for children, when you mature and grow up, you realize how little they are. I hope you got the point. And we will repeat the story with more details tomorrow night. The idea is that when a person is becoming a tzaddik, for him to say a sin, to tell a lie, or to gain honor, or to do something which is not for God's sake, is so despicable. It's so far, it hurts that person. So not only he has no desire but you cannot even convince him, you cannot even pay him to commit sin. That's a complete tzaddik because the evil is totally eradicated. As we'll discover, there are very few complete tzaddik, and they exist in every generation. In every, so how many in total?
26.
Throughout history. How many in total throughout history?
I don't know. Only 36?
1800. Oh,
Yeah, bro.
I'm always the last one. All right, let's continue. We are on page 154.
I have a thought.
Yeah,
The examples you gave lead to one believe the message that it's such a pitiful little thing that you should not be punished for. The question is, how does one, as a human, can understand that and appreciate the situation in a way that because if that's the case, we will forgive, forgive, and forget everything. There's nothing worth,
if somebody can get to that level,
yeah.
that's the goal. But it's very, almost unreal. As we'll discover, that's why Job says you've created righteous. Remember, one of the questions that a man has free choice. Excuse me, at the beginning of Tanya, we studied, Job says you created the wicked, you created righteous, and the Rabbi asked, what do you mean you created righteous men? It's a choice, we can become righteous. The idea of the righteous, as we're discovering here, is actually only God created. We cannot reach that level. The goal is to reach the level of a Beinoni, as we'll discover in chapter 12.
Rabbi, 18,000 tzaddikim is incomplete, right?
No, complete. Throughout the ages.
How do we know? It says incomplete here.
Really? Okay, I may be wrong.
18,000 incomplete.
What?
Says in the Talmud.
It says in the Talmud? See, Ali is a scholar.
I never doubted it.
This means, I'm reading page 154 at the bottom. Hence, according to the abundance of love towards God, so is the extent of hatred towards the spiritual sitra acha, which nurtures the physical pleasures, and the utter repugnance of the evil of physical pleasures. As we discovered, if I have someone I love completely and someone else hate that person, I'm going to hate that person. And therefore, if someone does not completely hate a sin, then he's not completely in love with God.
I can understand hating sin, but the word hate has such an ugly characteristic that how can you hate someone just because you hate someone else or love someone else?
It's a very good question. He's asking, how can you use these very, very harsh words, hate? So first, before I respond, this is a verse from Psalm. Tachlis sinos neisim leoivim oyuli. A complete hatred, I hate them, they are my enemies. King David says that. In Ledavid Hashem Oirevishi, in chapter 26, we saw 28, we say it in month of Elul every day. He hates those that hate God, right? Tachlis. You know what tachlis sina means? Complete hatred. David was a complete tzaddik. He's one of them, King David. So he says he completely hates those who hate God. And they are my enemies, even though I never met those people. So the question is not on me. You see what the Rebbe is saying, similarly he's saying, all I do is interpret the Torah, opening it up and showing you the depth of the Torah. So that's one. Then we can go a little farther. Hate is an advantage when it comes to certain parts of life. I used to visit army bases in Israel. Israelis, as soon as they reach the maturity of driver license, they drive madly. Worse than South America. I mean, there is a Wild West in Israel, in some parts of the country. It's more dangerous than. Now imagine those 18 with all the hormones, they go to the army, and some of them are become drivers, trucks and jeeps, and driving generals, the youngsters. So you have to tame them. You literally have to tame them, because otherwise it's very dangerous. By the way, I have an uncle, my mother's brother was killed while serving. He was 18 and a half. His yahrzeit was in Tammuz last month. He was in the army. Saturday night, they went partying in Jericho. That's where his base was. On the way back, he flew off to a ditch, and he died after 3 days. Why? They were driving Meshuggah in Jericho. This was literally Wild West. You have an army car, so nobody's going to try to stop you. And you have no traffic lights. It's a one-way, it's literally one way, not two lane. It's a one lane for both sides. Just like I was here in Kharkiv and in Ukraine. It's some roads, Meshuggah, for us. So why do I say that? So I used to go to the army bases as a young man to visit soldiers and put on tefillin with them and study Torah with them in my free time during summertime. They used to have a big banner as you leave the base. So when you go back, speed is advantage at war, but disadvantage on the road. And speeding is a great advantage during war. During war, yes, you want to reach your destination the quickest as possible. But during driving in city, it's a great disadvantage because you can lose your life in 1 minute. Mm-hmm. Okay. So is speeding, that's something that I took from it because I would see it every day. For 3 weeks, I had a summer vacation of 3 weeks. Every day I would ride with a bike a couple of miles to that base. I had a pass and I would go in from place to place. I have learned that speed, everybody's talking about speed limits and how dangerous you lose control of the car at a certain speed. But when you are at war, you want to go as fast as you can. Because if you're slow, you're going to lose it. The same is about killing. At doing war, it's a great advantage to kill as much. That's why they train those people to sharp shooting, to do it as quick as possible, not to waste ammunition. We have here a member who has a big sign on his next to his big safe with many guns. It says, due to increase of ammunition cost, there will be no warning shots fired.
That is me.
That's the sign. You need to understand that some things, there is no such thing as complete evil. We talked about it here, that since when God created the universe, he created it in such a way there is no black and white. There is no complete evil, there is no complete good. Every good a man does, there is some side benefits, some side issues. Every evil a person does has some benefits. I thought somebody got offended when I said that even from Hitler, something good came out, the creation of the state of Israel. There is no such thing as complete evil. We have to eradicate evil. We have to destroy evil. We have to have no mercy. We have to not give them a second chance. But the reality is that God created the universe. Once this universe was created, is that it's a mix. Meaning you cannot tell someone it's ultimate evil. You cannot tell someone is ultimate righteous. There is no such thing. However, there are exceptions to the rule. And therefore, hatred in general is not good, but at times is a blessing. And if I have someone who is a drug dealer in yeshiva, My kids are away from me and I'm very worried. Yesterday, we went to a party and my son told one rabbi that I told my boys, you can choose any yeshiva you want except Los Angeles. I was in yeshiva in Los Angeles and I knew how dangerous it was. Now, the rabbi, he said it to Levi, my son Levi, said it to Rabbi Buket. Rabbi Buket was born and raised in LA. His father is a rabbi there. And I knew him when he was 4 years old. I was in LA, in Los Angeles. Now, today it's different. Today, Los Angeles is one of the top yeshivas. And Shmuli, my other son, my youngest son, who's just speak to go there for a year. He's going for a year to Los Angeles. So we were speaking how things have changed. I said, when I grew up, I said to my kids, completely forbidden. You want to pick Israel, there is London, there is France. I had a son who picked Brinois, which is the south of Paris. He was there for 2 years, 3 years. I had a son who picked Israel for 2 years, 3 years. Mandy was there for 2 years in Israel. They picked Miami, which, you know, I wasn't so excited. But Los Angeles was out. Yeah, because I have to preface. Because it was too close to home. Los Angeles was a big video. Today it's a whole different story. If one of my kids want to go to Los Angeles, I would say, why not? That's great. Because the supervision, the atmosphere have changed. But there are times when you say completely no. So the same is about yeshiva boys. There are some bad influence, even in yeshiva. You may, surprise. And some kids, there was a time my son was influencing one of my kids, and I said to my son, if one more time I find that you have done or socialized with this person, I would send you a ticket. Before you know it, you would just be asked to pack, and on the way to the airport, I already find a ticket for you to come home. And thank God it helped. There has to be sometimes complete hatred. If you get rid of the idea of hatred, you have eliminated part of God's blessings. So just like speed, I've used many examples. Speed is a disadvantage on the road, but at war, during wartime, it's a great advantage. Being able to shoot at people and make sure to kill them is the great tragedy. However, during war, it's the great advantage for someone who's a sharpshooter. He'll be able to save an ammunition instead of trying. The same is about evil activities. There has to be a total eradication. There's no such thing. We are open to all, so let's teach them all religion. So let's teach them, let them taste all drugs, and then let them make choice. It doesn't work like that. The same is about the hatred. Since the Sitra Achra, at the bottom of page 154, is spiritual and hence distant from physical man, the term hatred is appropriate to it with regards to the evil of physical pleasures, which are closer to man than the term repugnant is applicable. The repugnance of having something odious placed before one's very eyes. The rabbi is saying, for repugnance is as much the exact opposite of love as is hatred. In any event, we have established that this tzaddik's utter despisal of evil is predicated on his loving of God to the greatest degree. He is therefore called a complete tzaddik, since the quality of by virtue of each of which he is termed the tzaddik, that is, his love of God, is on the highest and most complete level. He is also called a tzaddik who knows only good. He possesses only good, having transformed all the evil within him to good. And as I explained, soon we'll get to understand a deeper level of a complete tzaddik, a deeper understanding. But one we need to know now is there is no evil desire. Where is the evil desire? He didn't kill the evil desire, he converted it to positive. Hence, the incomplete tzaddik, whose love of the light is imperfect, must also be lacking in the hatred of evil. This in turn indicates that he retains some vestige of evil, albeit unfelt. He is therefore called a tzaddik who knows evil, because he's not completely in love with God, therefore he's not completely hating that which is hated by God. The incomplete tzaddik, says the Rebbe, is he who does not hate the sitracha, the spiritual klipot, with an absolute hatred. Therefore, he also does not find evil, physical desires and pleasures absolutely repugnant. As long as his hatred and abhorrence of evil are not absolute, perforce he must have retained some vestige of love and pleasure towards it. The filthy garment in which the animal soul had been clothed, meaning, as explained above, the evil inclination, the lusting after worldly pleasures, have obviously not been completely shed from it. There is some of it still around, and therefore, page 156, 2, the evil of the animal soul has not actually been converted to good, since it still has some hold on the filthy garments, that is, the desires for pleasure in which the animal soul had previously clothed and expressed itself. However, except that this vestige of evil is imperceptible and cannot express itself in evil desires, etc., because the evil is nullified in the good by reason of its minuteness and is accounted as nothing. That is overwhelming. The overwhelming preponderance of good prevents the evil from being a sense and from finding expression. That's everything I shared with you in the last 2 weeks. Indeed, as is therefore called tzaddik veralo, which means not only a tzaddik who knows retain evil, but also a tzaddik whose evil is subjugated and surrendered to him, to the good within him. Since a tzaddik, such a tzaddik, is identified with the good, since he is overwhelmingly good, perforce, then the fact that he retains some evil indicates that his love of God is also not complete. For a complete love of God would have converted all the evil within him to good. He is therefore called an incomplete tzaddik. As explained above, this is the same point that I have shared with you. As explained above, the terms complete and incomplete denotes the tzaddik's level of love for God. And the term who knows only good and who knows evil denotes the degree of which eradication and transformation of evil. So a complete tzaddik is someone who has a complete love for God. An incomplete tzaddik is someone whose love to God is not complete. A tzaddik that knows no evil is a tzaddik that had converted the evil into positive. A tzaddik who knows evil is a tzaddik whose evil still exists, albeit in a deep sleep and slumber, has no power because it's totally nullified to the vast power of the godly soul. Now, this level that the incomplete tzaddik who knows evil is subjugated into myriads of levels consisting of varying degrees in the quality of the minute remaining evil deriving from any one of the 4 evil elements of which the animal soul is composed, as we studied in chapter 1. What the Rabbi is saying, and we're going to go, we'll read it further. The Rabbi is saying that a complete tzaddik, there is one level. He has no evil. So there is no levels, there is no degrees. An incomplete tzaddik, there are many, many degrees. There is someone whose evil is about gossiping. Another one is about illicit relations. Another one is about keeping Shabbat. Another one is about, so the desire does not translate into sin because he's a righteous man. But the level of an incomplete, the level of evil that still exists has a spectrum of many, many untold, many incomplete tzaddiks. So you can have 2 incomplete tzaddiks, and the part of the evil soul that still remains is different from one person to the other. And that's what the Rabbi is saying now.
But they're both very small.
Minute, that you will need a microscope to find it, but it's still there.
No,
Huh?
in all incomplete tzaddik cases, it's very, very small.
They don't act on it.
They never act on it. How do we know it's incomplete? Because its hatred towards worldly or sinful matters is not complete hatred. as the rabbi explained, that there are two opposites here, and therefore one indicates on the other. In one tzaddik, the remaining evil may consist of element of water. In another, the evil may consist of sparks of the element of fire, and so on. This subdivision of level is qualitative based on the type of remaining evil. We studied in chapter 1 that there are 4 elements: water, air, fire, and earth, and each one is responsible for different types of evil behavior, and the source, the root, is any one of those 4 elements. So you have an incomplete tzaddik that is missing or lacking an iota, not even 1%, a nano of a percentage in one of the 4 elements, and that can translate into many, many different levels.
With these tzaddikim, or somewhat tzaddikim, are known only to God, because
Right.
they're not manifested the way you see them. I mean, it's
Correct.
obvious.
Correct. And you're going to ask, why is it so important? And the answer is, it's not very important. However, to have a complete understanding, the rabbi is devoting 1 chapter for both tzaddiks. Next chapter is for both wicked. And Beinoni, this is a book of Beinoni, is the whole book. Okay? Actually, the rabbi has composed a book for tzaddikim, and it was completely burnt. There was a fire in Lioznia, in the town, that burned most of the city's homes, as used to be in Russia those days. And that house, with that book, there is nothing left. And the Hasidim felt that the reason it was burned is because it did not belong into this universe. There are no people that can benefit from it.
God sent a message.
God sent a message.
I have to ask a question.
Yes.
I can't help it. Do you know any tzaddiks? Have you heard of any tzaddiks other than Rebbe or somebody like that?
My Rebbe is a tzaddik,
Yes.
Incomplete or complete?
complete.
So how do you know?
What'd you say?
Because.
Did you say complete?
You said complete.
I don't have to prove. I'm not trying to convince you.
No, because I'm just,
I am certain.
because like you have incomplete people, like the incomplete ones that they do everything good, they never sin. But in their mind, they might be unfocused or whatever.
So
Like,
the following I read, and I don't want to use it as a proof, because I'm not in the business of proving who is a tzaddik and who is not. There is no mitzvah.
mhm.
There is a mitzvah to convince you to study Torah. There is a mitzvah to convince you to follow the righteous, right? It says, "Uledav kabo," cleave, connect, glue yourself up to God. And the Gemara asks, how do you glue yourself to God? And the Gemara says, find a righteous man and connect to that righteous man. And that will influence you, inspire you to be as kind as God, as merciful as God, as giving as God. So you have a mitzvah to connect to a righteous man. You have a mitzvah to, as I said, celebrate holidays, etc. There's no mitzvah to define who is a tzaddik. So it's not my job. But just because we're speaking about it, I'll share one story. In the early 50s, the Lubavitcher Rebbe assumed leadership officially in the middle of January. I know the Hebrew date, not the English, and 10th of Shvat, 1951. The previous Rebbe, the father-in-law, the 6th Chabad Rebbe, passed away on the 10th of Shvat, 1950, 10 years after he arrived. He arrived here in 1940. 10 years after he arrived here, he passed away, and it took a year since the Rebbe to be the Rebbe. In the 50s, there was a group of students who entered into an audience with the Rebbe. And one of the students turned to the Rebbe and he says, what makes the Rebbe different than all the other black hats? And the Rebbe says to him that a Rebbe is someone who has decided that the worldly pleasures will have no impact whatsoever, and that he will only conduct himself the way God wants him to conduct himself. This is the Rebbe's own understanding of what a Rebbe is, which to me, it is what a tzaddik is about. Now, whether a person, many people can say that, but not necessarily are able to perform that way, With the Rebbe, that's what I saw. Let's continue. Herman, did I answer your question? I don't remember what, if I answered.
No, not really,
Okay, well,
because I assumed you were gonna say that Rabbi is static, and I concur with that. But
I don't know of any other tzaddik. I'm so sorry.
Incomplete, you know, any other incomplete?
Not even incomplete?
I want you to know that there is no difference on the outside between a complete and an incomplete. Because both of them in their action will be perfect. A Benoni, by the way, is the same way. That's why remember Rabbah says, I'm a Benoni, and the Gemara asks you, you're going to kill all of us? And the Rebbe says, how is it possible for Rabbah to make such a mistake? What the Rebbe is going to explain later is that because in action or speech or thought, the revealed part, the garments, as we call now you're a Kabbalist, you know, the garments of the soul, you won't see a difference, a distinction between a Benoni and a Tzaddik, incomplete and complete. They all have the same garments, exactly the same. They can change the same number, same color, same amount of use. The only difference is the soul, godly soul only versus little animal soul versus 50-50. A Benoni is, I feel sorry for him because they have a 50-50, which means there is a constant war, milchama, like lechem, something they live with every single day, a challenge before they do good. A Benoni, as opposed to a wicked, will end up always winning, never gives up, always fighting.
So is the Benoni then it's a matter of degree with the incomplete side? It's a matter of degree?
It's qualitative, not quantitative. Let me explain. Even though on the quantity as well, because an incomplete tzaddik would have, let's say, 1,000 of animal soul, and the Benoni might have a 40% of the animal soul. But it's not that's the distinction. The distinction is that the Benoni will have a challenge any time before it comes to performing a good deed. Before it does a mitzvah, there is something that pulls them, stay in bed a little longer, it's raining outside. Or why are you paying the full amount? You can say to them that they sold you a damaged good, get a discount. A tzaddik will never have that challenge. So it's a whole different
So
ballgame.
someone who makes Ben a greater person than a tzaddik because he's fighting all the time and he's getting it right.
You said it. So this is a very deep understanding, but the response is that the tzaddik will face his own challenges within holiness. Otherwise, he has no purpose. His purpose is to challenge or to inspire the community, not to fight within. And that's a very difficult task. You understand that?
Rabbi, I'm speaking for myself, not anybody else, including all the here. But you put it in such a way, tzaddik, incomplete tzaddik, Benoni, and others. One self gets to a conclusion, at least for now, which makes you so worthless at a level of impurity that you have compared to a tzaddik.
You're making a very good point. It's a very valid point. What Herman is saying, that based on this, we, at least not you, but me, a very, very low level of relationship of connection to God, of the godly soul. 100% right. However, we're in such a state of mind where the little bit that we do has so much value before God that sometimes it supersedes all of the tzaddikim before us. And the example I can use is, imagine someone who is the only child born at a very old age to a couple, and then he got sick. And the doctors are fighting for their life. A little vital, a little sign of life, moving fingers, will bring so much joy to the parent, as opposed to someone who's a lot of children. So when the child, same age, would move fingers, so what? The child crawls, so what? A Benoni, a righteous, is like people who are born healthy. I'm talking about physically, and I'm comparing. It's not a good comparison, but it's the best that I can do. There is no, it doesn't call attention to the parents, to the parents. But imagine a child who was born with so many challenges, and then he does a little bit, once a day, he will put a smile. Once a day, he will answer to the parents when they say hi, and you'd say hi, once a day. The parents would be sitting and waiting all day for that sign. This is the way we are, no matter how, and that's what makes it so special. So we talk about special need children. In reality, I'm sorry to break the news, but our soul is a special needs soul. So from one hand, comparing it to the previous generations, there's no comparison. On the other hand, the little that the soul connects, which is very, very little, he's so cherished by God, way, way more than all the other previous generations. I hope I did not hurt anybody, and I hope I did not cross the line. I just am trying to share that this, what you're getting to, is very correct. Compared to previous generations, our good deeds and our study and our doing is very little, but it's very, very powerful. Another way of looking at it, a whole different view. I just wanted to address you by the way where you're coming from and living it at that point, at that stage. Another way the rabbis tell us, it's like a midget standing on top of a giant. You need to reach the top of the roof, the ceiling, I mean. And there is a giant in the room. As much as he tries, he doesn't reach. He's 8 feet tall, and the roof and the ceiling is 14. But there is a midget that's only 12 inches high. But he climbs, they put him on top of the head of the giant. And he does like that, and he's able to switch or fix the light. The credit goes to the midget. Everybody's going to clap and thank the midget for doing it, even though he is nothing without the giant. So as Jewish people, our souls, it's only after so many generations of good that we have conquered so much within the godly soul. And our doing is qualitatively and quantitatively is very little. However, it is the most powerful one because it is what will achieve the connection with God. Do you understand that?
I do.
Does it help you?
That
Okay.
does, yeah. I have a long way to go.
So the rabbi started by speaking that there are many, many levels of an incomplete tzaddik because there are 4 elements. Each element can be divided into millions of different levels, and each one would get their own missing, an incomplete tzaddik in a very little. In one tzaddik, the remaining evil may consist of the element of water. In another, the evil may consist of a spark of element of fire, and so on. This subdivision of levels is qualitative based on the type of remaining evil. The Alter Rebbe will now describe, as it were, a quantitative subdivision depending on the degree to which the evil loses its identity within the good. In one tzaddik, the vestigial evil may be such that the proportion of good to evil could be described as 60-1. The evil in another tzaddik may be more minute, so that it is overwhelmed by a proportion of good that is 1,000-1, and so on. Yet, to borrow a term from the law concerning non-kosher foodstuff, where in certain cases of error, the rule is that even a preponderance of 60 part kosher to a non-kosher is sufficient to render the entire mixture kosher, since the non-kosher food is no longer capable of obtaining the mixture of its with its flavor. I'll explain in a moment. We may likewise say in our case that a preponderance of good over evil to the degree of 60 to 1 is also capable of preventing the expression and perception of the remaining evil. In the Alter Rebbe's words, let me explain. In Jewish law, if you have kosher and non-kosher mix, there are different ways in way that you can still get the food to be kosher, even though non-kosher dropped into it. At times, it can be majority. In other words, if I had kosher, not wine, if I had a kosher vinegar or a kosher apple juice with non-kosher apple juice, non-kosher apple juice fell into kosher apple juice, it's liquid, there is no piece that I can remove, then you go in majority. If I had 2 liters and I added 1 liter, it's all kosher. Why? It got nullified by the kosher. Sometimes the majority rule, and therefore it overpowers the minority. Sometimes it has to have at least 60 times. An example would be a drop of milk fell into a pot of roast. Meat and milk is forbidden, and it's not enough to have majority. You need to have at least 60. So, for example, you measure how big the pot, the soup, with the roast, with the vegetables. If, let's say, it's more than 60 drops, the equal amount of, or a spoonful of milk fell in, then if it's more than 60 times as much as it fell, the whole pot is kosher. Less than 60, it's not kosher. Sometimes you have to calculate by 100. And one of them is orla. In Israel, in the Holy Land, fruits or fruits from trees, the first 3 years are totally forbidden. They have to be, they're not allowed to benefit from the trees. What if someone took off an orange and squeezed and made orange juice? And that cup of orange juice that he poured into a vat, huge vat of a meal that he had in the ingredients, he had to have a cup of orange. Now the orange juice is forbidden because it's from the first 3 years. If there is 160, is not sufficient. There has to be 100. If there is 100 times the measure of that juice, it's totally nullified. It's all kosher. Sometimes it has to be 200. 200 is truma, tithe, or contribution to the kohen. Anybody who is a farmer in the Holy Land has to give 10% to a Levi of whatever grows, and a tithe, which is about 1.8%, to a kohen. He gave it to a kohen, and I stole it from him, and I went and grounded the wheat, made it flour, and I baked a huge cake with it. There has to be 200 as much kosher to the non-kosher, otherwise the whole thing is not kosher. So you have 60, you have majority, simple majority, you have 60, you have 200 and 200. Just like you have super majority in Congress, certain things, you need to have 2/3. It's not enough to have just majority. So here back to our discussion. Says the Rebbe.
I think she's right. I didn't hear from her. She went to the doctor today.
Why, says the Rebbe, why there are myriads of levels of incomplete tzaddik, not just qualitatively, but quantitatively. How small and how much was it nullified? Was it nullified by 60th, 1/100, 1/200, etc.? And the subject, in the Alter Rebbe's words, the subdivision also takes into account the degree to which the remaining evil is nullified in the good because of its minuteness. Whether in 60 times as much good, for example, or in 1,000 or 10,000 and so on. These various sub-levels in the ranks of incomplete tzaddikim are the levels of the numerous tzaddikim found in all generations, all of whom belong to the category of incomplete tzaddik. As we find in the Gemara, 18,000 tzaddikim stand before the Holy One, blessed be He. Thus, though many attain the level of tzaddik, they are in fact incomplete tzaddikim. We will talk about the complete tzaddik next time, so just let's close. There are 18,000 tzaddiks throughout the years, but they are all incomplete tzaddikim. A complete tzaddik, there are only 36, as we'll discuss next week. And as we discover, there are many, many levels, myriads of levels of incomplete tzaddik based on the quantitative, the size of the evil, or qualitative, the quality, the power that the evil soul exerts. And thank you very much. We'll continue next week.
Thank you.